Fortinet is fast growing, got a huge potential and meets a lot of the criteria we like to see in our quality investing styles.
It's a very sticky business.
Compounded by 31% since IPO.
Total addressable market is absolutely huge.
Technology is becoming a war and countries are attacking. In 2020, the cyber crime loss was 3 trillion.
Cybersecurity is one of the big growth areas in the next kind of 10 to 15 years. Companies are just going to be spending millions and billions going forward.
But of course, being very balanced researchers, what are the risks of investing in Fortinet in your opinion? Welcome to the latest episode of the Intelligent Wealth Podcast. As usual, I've got my eminent guests, Carl Roberts, fellow director at Minerva Money Management, our fund management company, and our head of research, no less, Awet Girmay. Today, we're going to be covering a fabulous company called Fortinet that specializes in the field of cybersecurity. Now, I was struggling to define exactly what cybersecurity is. We all think of it as hacking systems like this, the big publicity of CrowdStrike a short while ago. So I thought I'd just look up a dictionary definition of it to make it a bit clearer to us all. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting computer systems, networks and data from unauthorized access, misuse, damage or destruction. So Fortinet is in that field and it's fast growing. It's got a huge potential to grow in the future. And the company meets a lot of the criteria we like to see in the kind of companies we invest in our quality investing style. So just to remind you, this show is for serious investors who probably are doing their own research into great companies in the style of investing we like called quality investing. We are not offering advice. This is purely our opinions. So do your own research, because if you just follow other people's recommendations, 9 times out of 10, at least, it will probably go horribly wrong. Remember, the price of shares goes up or down. You may not get back the full amount invested. So without any further ado, let's crack on and speak about this great company, Fortinet. Probably the best person to start off with is our head of research, Awet. What do you have to say about Fortinet?
Yeah, Fortinet is one of the great story we like. I mean, it's one of the biggest holding in the fund, and the reason is, as you mentioned, Tony, is run by a visionary founder, which he founded in 16 years ago. And if you invested in Fortinet 16 years ago, you would have compounded by 31% until since IPO, which is a 10,000 investment would become more than 650,000 today. So you have compounded by 31%, which is more than the S&P 500. So the company has, evolved through time in the last 16 years. They have been disciplined in terms of capital allocation, and we can see the tremendous growth in the cybersecurity space is growing, because the reason is the crime are rising and the attack are rising because, technology is becoming a war, like a trade war. We're having a technology war, and countries are attacking, interfering in the election and so on. And government are increasing their spending to defend these attacks. And it's becoming one of the biggest spoken and technology in the future. I personally think cybersecurity, because crime is rising with artificial intelligence, and the way we can defend it, and the spending has to rise. And I can see there's a big opportunity in the cyber space in the next few years.
Certainly, that's true. What are your views of Fortinet and the field they're in, cybersecurity, Carl?
Yeah, I think this is one of the big growth areas in the next kind of 10 to 15 years, which is type of area we like to invest in. I think, the world's gone digital, but there's even more digital to come. We've only really scratched the surface when you think of artificial intelligence about to be adopted throughout probably every sector of society. So it's only going to make, cybersecurity even more important, because these AI threats are going to be even harder to secure against. Companies are just going to be spending millions and billions on cybersecurity going forward. I think it's interesting to just look at, there's lots of examples in recent years of some big cybersecurity attacks. One really recent one is the one on Marks and Spencer's in the UK, big retail brand in the UK. Online systems were down for a number of days. It's now been reported that lots of users' personal data was stolen, order histories, names and addresses. They say that the card details weren't stolen, but we don't know for sure at this stage. They're not going to want to kind of accept that if it is true. So that's kind of one of the most big recent ones. Adidas is another one recently. Lots of customer data stolen. So these companies are going to be spending more and more on cybersecurity. And the good thing about Fortinet is it does seem to be right up there as one of the market leaders, and has this interesting integrated approach. So not only does it do the kind of hardware systems, it seems to have the software systems for all different parts of the kind of technology journey. So from being in your home, on your home laptop, all the way to kind of big data centers and the cloud security. And I think over the recent years, it's gone to moving into the kind of software service. So again, it's that recurring income that that's always good for a business. So it's a really interesting area to be in.
Total addressable market is absolutely huge, and so the growth rate, which I'm sure I will come on to explain in a minute, is it's got great potential as long as Fortinet stay ahead of the game. Interestingly, the primary founder owner is Ken Shi. I think I pronounced that right, XIE, and his brother Michael Shi. But Ken has previously had success at building and selling off a company called NetScreen for $4 billion in 2004. So he's got a great track record already. Between them, they own, I think it's about 15% of the company, Fortinet, which is an abbreviation for Fortified Networks, which is a nod to its mission to build digital fortresses for businesses and governments. I thought that was quite interesting. It's a bit curious why Ken Shi owns less shares than his brother, because he seems to be the main man. It's not significantly less, but he owns 7.1% of the company, and his brother Michael owns 7.9%. I don't know why that is. It's a bit odd. But one of the things I like about this Ken Shi is he's yet another example of one of these quiet CEOs under owners who you've never heard of, and yet he's fabulously wealthy and fabulously successful. He just wants to just focus on being an engineer. He doesn't want any self-publicity. I find that quite interesting. And as a result, he's built this absolutely fabulous company, which I'm sure Awit's going to tell us a lot more detail about in this show. So what's the reason we like Fortinet so much? What are the main reasons, Awit? What boxes does it tick for us?
Yeah, I mean, Fortinet ticks a lot of boxes. The first one we look at is the DNA. As you mentioned, Tony, is the founder. He's been leading the company for more than 16 years since its inception, since the IPO. So that's the first thing. We always like the DNA, the culture he created. Even when I went to Glassdoor, the approval rate is higher. And I think there's always higher emphasis on the financial, but not on the culture, because in the long term, I think important as well to put more emphasis on the culture. And Fortinet, they have a great culture. They have been allocating capital for the last 16 years, great allocation of capital. For example, if you look at the return on capital employed is 31% in the last 5 years average. And, that's great. And they've been reinvesting in, as Carl mentioned earlier, in quantum computing, the cloud, and acquiring businesses and growing. The company has been pretty much growing in the cyberspace, and we like to see, a tailwind in the space. And we can see the market, the total addressable market is growing rapidly. And I read a research by Grand View Research. They estimate the market to become almost like $500 billion by 2030. So that's compounded growth rate of 13%. And we can see, I think that on the other side, what we can see is the cyber crime is rising. I think that it was in 2020, the cyber crime lost was $3 trillion. We lost from cyber attack and cyber crime, and this figure is expected to grow to 14 trillion by 2028. That's almost the size of the Chinese GDP. In 2020. So you can see there's a lot of opportunity here to grow, and we like this sort of businesses. And when we look at the company valuation, we can see it's trading, current PE is 43 times and price to free cash flow is 39 times. But when we look at the discounted cash flow, even though the market is implying a growth rate of 14%, but we can see that free cash flow has been growing by 26%. So we can see that there's a lot of margin of safety in this business, even though the market thinks the company can only grow to by 14%. I do think the company can grow by more than that. So the valuation is still fairly valued company.
Yeah. I mean, I've personally suffered, I don't know if you'd call it a cyber attack, but I was defrauded out of £5,700 in my Coinbase account a few months ago. And I think you could call this they didn't hack my account as such, but what they did, they sent me an email claiming there was a security update. I always check the email address because, when you click on the email address, you quite often find underneath what looks like an official address, you've got a totally random address. But it actually came up as Coinbase.com. And so I was pretty sure it was correct. Foolish thing to do. I didn't give away any bank details or anything, but what they cleverly did, they created this piece of software that when I answered the email, it went into my account. It pre-populated my Coinbase account with another bank account. And then the Bitcoin was sold and transferred to that bank account in the blink of an eye. It was gone. And there was nothing I could do about it. I'd been completely fooled. I mean, obviously, you should never answer emails when it comes to these online these apps, because everything goes on in the app, doesn't it? Not by email. So I broke the golden rule there and I was totally fooled. But that's just an example of the increased sophistication of cybersecurity and AI, how they're going to increasingly catch you out with replicating voice messages, creating emails, and websites that look totally like the original, so I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to fight against it. So I think Fortinet is in a very, very strong field, as long as they continue to be successful and don't suffer the kind of reputational risk that CrowdStrike suffered from.
CrowdStrike.
I think they could go from strength to strength. They probably will.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at recent data, for example, it was published by CrowdStrike. AI pushing emails now have 54% click rate in comparison to human written email, which is 12% rate. So that's huge. It is advancing. And even if you look at hackers used to take 9 weeks to exploit vulnerabilities. Now, by 2026, it will only take under an hour to exploit vulnerabilities. And the problem we have is there are brokers selling these data. So, exploiting, if there's any vulnerability, they sell it to, hackers. So the crime is rising, as we mentioned, is just going to become 14 trillion market. And there will be a lot of players to using AI and to use to get into your system and take sensitive information.
We spend a lot of money in cybersecurity, insurance and systems, and we're only a small firm. We just don't want to take any chances. I just don't think you can. We did have an example. To be fair, this goes back a few years. We did have an example where somebody did contact us by email and asked to withdraw money out of their investment. And it's quite a lot of money. It's about £50,000. Fortunately, we thought it was unusual for this particular client. So we rang the client and she was on holiday. She knew nothing about it. So we managed to stop that one. We've never had a case where we've been defrauded, but we've heard of huge cases where other firms have made big mistakes. I mean, in the IFA world, independent financial advisor world, I knew of one case where a firm lost, I think it was £1 million from a client's investment because they had a junior person answered the phone and they were just naive and just accepted the instructions to withdraw money. I don't know how that happened. That's a real weakness in their systems for that to be allowed. But you get much bigger cases than that, don't you? Because there was this deep fake heist in Hong Kong not long ago where an individual lost $25.7 million after being tricked by deep fake video calls. So it's really quite scary what's happening and what could happen in the future. So all the more reason why if a company like Fortinet can be better and better and better at protecting companies, they're going to be more and more in demand, and people and companies will think nothing of paying quite a lot of money for the protection because it's worth it. Don't you think, Carl?
It's a classic. I think this is a classic buy and hold company, like I said earlier, for the next kind of 10, 15 years, because just in the right sector. Now, you want to identify those sectors, don't you, where the growth is going to come from, where the world is going to change. The good thing about Fortinet is it's built up a platform where it's well placed now. It's very hard as a competitor or a newer company to try and break into this space because
Yes.
they're integrated into or partner with Microsoft, Google, so they're integrated into all their systems. They've got their sort of revenue distribution is global. I think about 50% of it's US based, but they've also got about 30% in Europe, Middle East, even 20% comes from Asia. So very, very diversified kind of income streams, diversified globally. And it's one of these businesses as well that's can be quite kind of low cost for business to get into, because I think they cover all types of business sizes, but very expensive to switch. If anybody works in businesses or runs businesses, whenever you get the IT department wants to do an upgrade or wants to change something on your systems, it's horrendous, isn't it? We probably all experienced it where systems go down for a number of weeks. The upgrade never kind of works quite as it seems. So this type of service is people don't want to switch away once they've got a decent cybersecurity provider, because the cost and the effort to do that is not good. So it's a very sticky business once they're in.
I think that's Carl, that's a very good example, because it's yet another box that we really like being ticked. They've basically got a very strong moat. We call it a moat. What do we call it? It's when you've got this advantage over other companies. It's very hard to break into. We like the fact that it's also owned. It's got founder owners with skin in the game. The two brothers, the Xi brothers, own 15%. It's in a very growing market. It just ticks so many boxes. These are the kind of companies we really do like. Yeah, I think I can only see it go from strength to strength unless I'm missing something. What are the threats, Awet?
The question I ask as well, like the world, the way we're heading with AI, the world has become digitalized. So moving forward, are we going to use less technology or more? It's a simple question.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, we are, heading to use more technology. And if we use more technology, we need to defend our gadgets, our computer, our data centers, our everything. And even countries, for example, North Korea and Iran and China and Russia, they are trying to interfere in election and so on. The cybersecurity and, you need to defend this kind of area so that the demand is going to be higher in the future.
What I find interesting is 97% of these cyber attacks are against the UK and the US.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Why do we think that is? Well, in the US, I can understand, probably because they've got the most IT companies there, the biggest and most IT companies probably in the States. That's probably why they're targeted. Why else could it be?
Yeah, it's probably like the UK is obviously still a big financial hub, isn't it, in the world?
Yes.
And also we've got a very big consumer market, retail market. I think it's probably
those reasons
goes towards it. Yeah.
I think you missed the question a moment ago. We've been very effusive in our praise about Fortinet, but of course, being very balanced researchers. What are the risks of investing in Fortinet, in your opinion?
I mean, the risk is pretty much, the hardware is made in Taiwan. And so there's a risk that if there's a Chinese invasion, supply chain would be disrupted. And the second one is like, as we said, we learned from CrowdStrike. Recently, there was a glitch on their software and suddenly there was a big spike. It was a big problem with the share price. And because of the issue, because cybersecurity is very sensitive market and you have to be perfect 100%. Nothing could happen. Everything to transition smoothly. So if something happened, the company could be, its reputation could be affected, for example. So that's one key, because reputation is key in the cybersecurity space. So if something happened which is outside of the control of the company, that could pretty much jeopardize the company's long-term reputation. And thirdly, we can see the competition from companies like CrowdStrike and other companies are coming to this, space, because as we know, capitalism is brutal. If there is more money to be made, there will be more entrant into the market to take a market share. So there will be a competition, and we can see the competition are rising. Especially, I can see there's a lot of Israeli company are emerging into the market. So there are a lot of risk that we can see. But again, without risk, there will be there's always risk with that investment.
What about the concentration of sales through three of the giant tech companies? What's your thoughts about that? Google, Amazon, Microsoft. That's quite a lot of, a lot of dependence on three major customers.
Yeah, I
Don't you
mean,
think?
when you think about it, for example, through Microsoft, they'll have a customer, Microsoft customers. So the distribution only can be affected if they have an issue with Microsoft and Microsoft would move to a different provider. Yeah, that's a
Right.
significant risk. But looking at the historical data, that's not one of the biggest risks that we see. The biggest risk is,
No.
as I mentioned earlier, is the reputation risk and, the hardware. And that's the main risk that we can
Yeah.
see.
It's clearly a very profitable sector as well. And in a way, while
Yeah.
I've been sitting here, I've been musing and thinking, when you
Mhm.
think about it, cybersecurity is like digital insurance, isn't it? And we know that insurance, when it's practiced the right way, as in Warren Buffett's insurance company, Geico,
Yeah.
can be incredibly profitable because, of course, if you get it right, you keep most of the premiums, don't you? And the same, I presume, it's the same with cybersecurity because this company does make a lot of money, and their compound annual growth rate, as you said earlier, 31%
Mm. Yeah.
annually since their flotation 2009 is extraordinarily high and consistent. What do you think of that then, Carl,
Yeah.
as
I
a
mean,
concept then?
Yeah, I think you're talking earlier about the negatives potentially, which is always useful to explore, and that is probably one of them in the market. We look at some of these companies and value them slightly differently to the overall market potentially, but
Mhm.
the overall market will say that it's got quite high expectations of Fortinet based on its current valuation. It did
Yeah.
miss some of its earnings targets
Hmm.
quarter one this year, and the
Hmm.
stock price did see an 8% decline in a single day.
Right.
A bit like when we discussed Nvidia the other day, it is priced, or the market price has priced it for significant growth. So it's not like this company's gone under the radar and we've just discovered it. The market knows about this
Mm.
company and knows about its success. So I always sort
Yeah.
of say, the performance has been fantastic, but that's irrelevant now. It's what happens next. And
Yes,
the
absolutely.
market, has priced it quite highly, and any missed targets, they're going to punish it. So it would have been better to be
Mhm.
in Fortinet 5 years ago, but we can't do nothing about that now. So
No, of course.
yeah, that's one thing I would say is a kind of a potential risk going forward. But then I think the market it's in, it should stay strong.
Oh, I meant to ask you, that one of the major competitors surely is this company CrowdStrike. What do you see as the differences between the two companies, and how much of a threat to Fortinet is CrowdStrike in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about the cybersecurity space is those always revolving, right? At first, early on, I think there was a threat for Fortinet, but now I think Fortinet is catching up. I think we've seen recently they are implementing AI and they're moving faster. And what you can see as well with CrowdStrike and Fortinet, CrowdStrike target big institution and high accuracy rate, where Fortinet, the market they target is different. So the competition in terms of competition, there will be a competition, but the market is growing. For example, I'll give you an example. When Amazon moved to the cloud market, when they were the dominant player in the cloud market, most people thought, when Google and Microsoft came in, most people thought, Amazon will lose market share. But what happened is they grew together because it's a growing market. So
Yes.
Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, they are growing in the cloud space, and I can
Yeah.
see the same argument here because the cyberspace is growing and all the companies will grow in this space, and the competition is going to exist for sure, but companies are evolving. And for example, we can see Fortinet is working on the quantum computing space and implement AI and so on, and there's always uncertainty. I think even when we bought the company, there was a lot of uncertainty was priced in the company. That's why we got it for cheaper, and we managed to capitalize from the weakness
Yeah.
of the market. Because if you think about it, as an investor, quarterly, I mean, you can see the reputation. It ticks all the boxes, pretty much what we look for. And it's very difficult to find those sort of companies,
Yeah.
visionary run companies, good allocation
Yes.
in capital, skin in the game, and very profitable. As I mentioned, they still have 4.8 billion in cash. And you can see the free cash flow is 2.1 billion in 2024. The company is pretty much, if we look at the interest coverage, is 104 times of the company.
That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and because when you look at goodwill as well, they don't have a goodwill, so they don't have any. The balance sheet is very clean and quality. And the good news as well, Fortinet is buying back its shares. In the last few years, they have done 15% outstanding shares. They bought it back, and they planning to buy back. I probably think is it around $1 billion buyback still outstanding. So they will be buying back. They can grow into the market, and by buyback as well, we get they are increasing the earning per share.
Yeah, you
for
can't
investors.
underestimate the
Yeah.
powerful effect on share prices when companies buy back their own shares. It can make a huge difference to the annual returns. So that's really good. I just wanted to touch base again, just a little bit on the owners, because we don't know anything about them. They're so low profile. But what I thought was quite interesting about Ken Shi and his brother, I wonder if they previously had some kind of military experience, because very interestingly, Ken has he's put some effort into this Fortivet, hasn't he? Some money into Fortivet, where they train vet soldiers in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And he seems quite visionary. That he wants to train, what was it, 1 million people in cybersecurity. So this man has got real passion, and I like that. I like passion in a founder owner who's got skin in the game, because it usually affects the whole culture of the company, and you can't underestimate how important that is. In history, we've had cases where great visionary founder owners have died or retired, and the company's completely gone downhill afterwards. You can't underestimate that, and it's quite interesting that they've been running this company now for 25 years. I mean, how many examples have you got of visionary founder owners running a top company, S&P 500 company, for that long? You know, that is quite remarkable. So I don't know how old he is now, but do you know how old Ken Shi is? Must be about 60, I would imagine. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But he's not like Warren Buffett. He's not like 94. So, you know, there's still quite a few years to go. This man really does have great passion and belief, and I always like owners where they're very quiet and you don't hear anything about them. He's just focusing on making it a better business. You know, he's not getting distracted at all. So these are all really, really good signs. Any other thoughts, Carl, on that so far?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it a few times, but yeah, the quantum computing, I see this as a sort of a big area in the next about 5 to 10 years. And it's a risk. It's a risk to those in the cybersecurity space if they're not having a focus on this, because obviously, quantum computing is going to essentially break a lot of traditional cybersecurity products. But luckily, it does appear that Fortinet are moving into this area. They have some products already. I think one they've partnered with the BT Group at one point to launch quantum safe VPN, virtual private network communications, and I think that product might even be available now. So they are moving into this area, which is good. So they seem to be on the ball. But it'd be interesting to see how that disrupts the cybersecurity sector, because it's essentially going to break everything they've built before. They've essentially got to rebuild that whole kind of cybersecurity network, haven't they, going forward once quantum gets there?
Yeah, I think when we look at the quantum space as well, I was looking at this study and see how far we are. It seems to be we're still early stage, very early stage. So we can probably have it as an application maybe in the next 5 years, just to use it, a basic quantum. But the real application will probably take 20 years from now on, based on the information that I read. So we're still far. What I meant is they have enough time to prepare for the coming wave of quantum computing. Even with AI, they adapted quite well, implementing AI to, if there's any threat in the system, instant attack, they can immediately respond to it. So they have replied very well to AI and so on. So we can see it as well. If there's enough time, they will pretty much respond and adapt and evolve in terms of the quantum space.
I think we've pretty much covered the main points we wanted to cover about Fortinet, but I'm conscious that in previous shows I've sometimes ended it a bit too soon when you had burning things you wanted to mention, guys. So let's come, as we're near the close, let's come out with any of your final comments you'd like to make before we end the show today. Starting with you, Carl. Any other comments to make?
Nothing more to add apart from just to summarize it, just to say this is a high growth area, which, the next 10 to 15 years, I think if a company does well in this market, it's going to be one you're going to want to buy and hold.
Yes.
It's just going to be one of those essential services that every company, every person is going to need.
Yeah.
That's the type of investment you want to make, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. And you owe it?
Yeah, I mean, cyber security space is becoming critical. Everyone needs it, especially because we can see that technology is becoming a war, and most companies trying to attack your critical infrastructure, like electricity and your water, and very very critical infrastructure that we can't live without. So the amount of money that need to defend those critical infrastructure is very important. So the investment at the same time will go to this space is going to be very huge. So we expect to see a big bull market in the cybersecurity in the next few years.
Yeah, I totally agree with you both, Albert and Carl. Sadly, we've come towards the end of the show now. We'd just like to ask you, if you enjoyed it, could you share it with your friends and recommend us, give us reviews, particularly if you're on Apple Podcast. That would be very welcome. We'd like to have more listeners and viewers. I think that's pretty much it covered that I can think of. If you look in our show notes, there'll be extra material to help you in your own research. Remember what I said at the outset, always do your own research. We do these one-page company snapshots. We've got one on Fortinet to help you do your own research and make your personal decision whether you should invest in it or not. Don't take too much notice of what our views are on it, because that's based on our own research. You've still got to do your own research, decide whether it's right for you or not. Remember, that's the whole purpose of this show, to help you do your own research. Anyway, I must thank Carl and Albert for their very valuable contributions as ever, and say goodbye for now, and look forward to you listening to us again shortly. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today. Please help us spread the word by sharing this podcast with your family and friends. And don't forget to subscribe.